Anora is a movie directed by acclaimed indie director Sean Baker that stars Mikey Madison, who plays Annie, a young sex worker who marries the son of a Russian oligarch. Once the parents of the Russian oligarch figure out about the marriage, they set out to get it annulled. The film won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and placed as one of the People's Choice winners at the Toronto International Film Festival, making it a top contender for this year's Oscar race. Today I have on Workshopping Humanity contributor, co-founder of A1, A2 Productions, and writer at George on the Beat, George Ehret, to discuss this wonderful film on Workshopping Humanity, where we explore and dissect what media influence on a society as a whole and what they mean to us on a personal level. Welcome back to Workshopping Humanity. We are here for a brand new episode about what is known to be the biggest Oscar contender of the year so far, Anora, directed by fan favorite Sean Baker. This is one of the most buzzed and hyped about movies of the year, and we have a lot to dissect here. So today I have on Anora superfan George Ehret.
Hey, yo, what's up?
I thought George would be a great person to have on the episode because he is a really, really big fan of Sean Baker, and he's been hyping up this movie for the entire year and kind of called it being the sensation that it was. You know, I think that while this movie is about the female experience, we will do our best as two men to kind of come at it at our own perspective, because I know that's kind of like Workshopping Humanities is about talking about the collective in a way. And so like I'm kind of stumbling to say that like we're going to be respectful in the idea of we don't know the experience of Anora per se in our own lives, but this is us kind of commenting on the movie as the viewer, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think you explained yourself there.
Okay, cool. Sweet. So we'll start off an episode just like any other episode. So George, kind of what was your initial feelings towards Anora? Like, how did you become such a fan of it? How did you first discover it? And then like, what's just been your relationship with it in general?
I mean, I remember when it was first announced. It had to have been like late 2023. It was announced. You know, there's going to be another Sean Baker film coming in 2024. And I suppose it was about the right time. He usually makes films every 2, 3, 4 years, and you know, it was the right time. I guess it was like the right time for one to come out, and yeah, it was it just made sense then. And the interesting thing about it is, you know, I've always liked the guy's films, but when people ask me like, who are your favorite directors, I normally wouldn't go straight to him, which is odd because like I like he makes a lot of films that very much appeal to me, right?
Yeah,
but he wasn't one of my go-to answers for that necessarily. But I don't know. I remember something about it felt like this feels like something. It feels like there's something here, something special in its own sense. I don't even remember what it was exactly. Of course, it was announced that it was going to go to Cannes. I mean, that was pretty much expected that it would go, and it would play in competition for the Palme d'Or. And you know, the images came out, and it's like, you know, that got people more excited. But I feel like my suspicions about the film being something special came when people actually saw the film at Cannes and people reviewed it. Like a lot of people said straight up, it's like his best movie, right?
Yeah.
And people were talking about Mikey Madison, her performance is monumental. It's like it's like the peak of his career in a way. And I did not predict the Palme d'Or win. I will say I said it, I because I just am like, American films don't usually do that well when it comes to winning Cannes prizes, but it was so obvious that this was going to win something just based on the field of the films and how much of this film really was resonating. I was like, okay, it's going to win something. I think I predicted that would win screenplay, which ultimately went to the substance. But I remember following along with the ceremony, and these films got named, and we knew Anora had won because they, you find out which people get called back to the award show, and you kind of start to realize, oh shit, it just won the Palme d'Or. I did not expect that, but I think in hindsight, I probably should have seen it coming, because that was the film that people were talking about the most coming out of Cannes.
Yeah,
and it kind of showed.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it was definitely the buzziest movie at Cannes before it won the award. Like, it was the one that everyone was kind of like, oh, this one's really popping off here. That and The Substance, which we previously mentioned.
Yeah.
You know.
And it was after the Palme d'Or win that I kind of saw the vision for Best Picture. And I need to give credit to our friend Matt for Fantasy Film Ball, because he's the one who actually started talking about it. And he actually saw the movie while he was there. But I saw that because I wasn't really sure with Sing Sing. I'm still not, admittedly. Yeah. Although I do admit that the path is theoretically possible, even still. But I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Something about that doesn't feel quite right. And nothing about the other films felt right to me. And I just saw this movie. It won the Palme d'Or. It's got all this massive, passionate support. You've got an easy win in original screenplay, even back then. And I saw potential for actress win as well, because I never predicted Lady Gaga would win. I never predicted Jolie would win. And no one felt right there.
I almost forgot that we were doing like Lady Gaga early in the year, that we kind of were all.
Well, I never did.
That is fair. That's fair.
I could stand my ground on that. And I was just like, I can, if the movie just continues to grow in love and support, I can just see this really taking off in that way. I didn't necessarily foresee that it would be necessarily like one of the front runners at this point, but I kind of was getting the sense, this is this is more than Triangle of Sadness. This is more than Anatomy of a Fall. This is closer to Parasite than either of those two ever were. And
especially when it placed at Tiff's Pupil's Choice, with only
which you told me was not happening, but I stuck my ground on that one. I was like, no, I have a feeling.
I just it only had 4 screenings, so I was like, okay. Meanwhile, stuff like Wild Robot was playing every other time, it seemed like. So I was like, I just don't think there's enough eyes for it. But I guess I was wrong, because it still made it in. And I feel like that's a huge testament, because I think that's something that Call Me By Your Name did as well. It only had maybe 3 or 4 screenings, and it's still played. Yeah, so it's a strong movie for sure in that regard. That's a pretty crazy thing for it to pull off.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm glad that it's there. It makes Amelia Perez being there a little better, I guess.
That's a different conversation for a different day.
Yeah. So I'll go into my history with Anora. I have also been a big fan of Sean Baker. I am a really, really big fan of his film, The Florida Project. I lived in Florida for about 3 years and lived about 20 minutes away from where he filmed that movie. I passed by it multiple times a day, so I was very like acquainted with that area. And so that's a really special movie for me. It puts me in a time and place. And so I was definitely excited to see Anora. I'm not a huge fan of Red Rocket. I used to hate that movie, but I do understand kind of where it is in the context of everything at this point in my life. I don't hate it, but it's just not my favorite. So that put me in an interesting perspective of Anora. The thing that like I love the most about Sean Baker and his filmography is the fact that he takes what are complicated and could on paper feel like incredibly unlikable characters and forces you to feel for them and to understand their situations. And I think he does that really, really well with Anora. So this movie I have a really strange relationship with because I was at the Toronto International Film Festival and me and our friend Tristan, that you might know, who's been on the podcast a few times, got the really special opportunity to meet the entire cast and talk to Sean Baker moments before I saw the movie. And so to say that that wasn't like one of the single greatest film going experiences of my life would be a complete lie. And so like going into the theater, I was kind of on cloud nine, as in like this is going to be the greatest movie ever made. And so I do need to watch this movie again without that set of expectations in my head, because I don't think this is the perfect movie that everyone does, but I still have a lot that I took away from it. And I mean, we'll talk about it more in the meat of this episode, but like this movie does take a jarring shift tone within like 45 minutes, and it kind of threw me off when I first watched it, and I've been wanting to watch it again to see kind of how that holds up, because it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. But I am one that claims that film subverting your expectations is never a bad thing. I mean, it can be a bad thing. Joker 2 subverts expectations, but a movie's still fun. But I at least appreciate the boldness of it, you know? And so...
Right.
And I'm there with this movie too. I think it's really, really interesting that what they do and how they turn it and how they spin it. But the first 45 minutes, I think, are kind of perfect. And then the last sequence of this film, which we'll definitely get into, is stunning. I mean, it's really, really provocative work. And so I really do love that it is Sean Baker's moment, because he has been someone who's been in the scene for a long time, making these really interesting, understated movies about people that we don't really see in a lot of Hollywood movies. And it's finally time that he's getting his recognition. You talked about how people are talking about how it was his best. And I mean, and I'll claim that the Florida Project's still my favorite, but I feel like it is his opus in the way that like the Grand Budapest Hotel is Wes Anderson's opus, where it's kind of like the one you'd point to and be like, yeah, that's what a Sean Baker movie is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I really do love this movie. And again, I have a lot of special memories and warm fuzzies towards this movie because of the cool opportunities that I got surrounding it. And so it does hold a significant warm spot for me as well. And so I'm going to go back to you, George. What is something about this movie? What's a scene? What's a moment in this movie that really sticks out with you and resonated with you when you watched it?
I mean, for as much as I love about this movie, there's really not like, I can't really like give you anything I don't like about the movie.
Yeah.
But I think for everything that I talk about, we can talk about with Sean Baker, I think the best part of this film, its heart and soul, is Mikey Madison.
100%.
I mean, like, and I need to give a full disclaimer here. I'm kind of a set, okay? Like, let's be honest. She's my celeb crush. I think she's absolutely beautiful, right?
Yeah.
But also very talented. I'm not just saying this because I'm crushing. But I do like, it's gonna sound a little bit hyperbolic and maybe a little bit biased, but like I genuinely think this performance is like one of the like it is like I don't whoever the guy who said, "Oh, this performance belongs in the same ranks as Daniel Day-Lewis, There Will Be Blood," or Jenna Rollins and A Woman of the Influence. It's like, I would normally be a little bit apprehensive to something like that, but after seeing the movie, I kind of feel like I kind of agree, because I like, it's not just everything that happens in the middle of the movie where she's like at her showiest. It's not just at the end of the movie in which she was that, like, she actively brings like so much depth to this character that is like really palpable. And like she's talked about this in so many interviews, what she did obviously in preparation for the role, like learning about sex work and shadowing dancers and taking pole dancing classes. It reminds me of a story that's very funny. She apparently asked her dad to install a stripper pole in her house or something.
It's crazy.
Which is, and he was like completely fine with it. Like, yeah, sure, just completely nonchalantly. I love that, but I mean, there's obviously all of that stuff, but like, she talks a lot about how she collaborated with Sean to like craft the character, and like, she picked out a lot of the wardrobe and everything, but also she built her own backstory for the character, essentially. And I feel like, some of it is her, because like, from what I understand, like, I don't know if this is true of the character in the movie, but I know she's Jewish, and I think she has certain Russian ancestry in her. I read that in an interview, and I feel like there's certain things about her that she put into the character that she brought to that backstory, and it's like, you don't see that backstory in the film, but somehow you kind of feel like throughout the whole movie, like, oh, I know this person. Like, I know them. I see them every day, or I hear people talking about this person, or I know who Annie is, in a sense. And you feel all of her struggles, like, you feel like you just know her. Like, you don't know her, but you know her. It's a weird thing. And I think a lot of that is her. And she really drives home the, that desire for intimacy as well, which I think is a major theme of this film, is, this desire for intimacy, especially as it pertains to sex work. I mean, it really, and she just really delivers it. And I think it's that final scene in the film that really kind of nails it.
Yeah.
As well. And, I see some people say, like, well, she becomes a little bit passive in the second half of the movie. I mean, considering what happens, it's like she's kind of powerless in that situation. But, yeah, I mean, like, she really she is the movie in a sense. Like, so it's a bit cliche to say, but like, she is the film's beating heart. And like, if you got an actor who was not this committed to it, I feel like it just wouldn't work as well as it does. And she is she's the film's beating heart.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think she definitely, like, if you got a less committed and talented actress to perform this role, even with how good the screenplay is, it probably wouldn't work nearly as effectively. But she's definitely bringing her own in here. I definitely think she is the single best, probably leading performance. I'll say she's the second best leading performance of the year. because Adrian Brody in The Brutalist is something else.
I mean, I haven't seen it, but like I don't think anyone's beating.
You haven't. I mean, but we'll talk about it when we talk about it. I mean, it's two incredible performances essentially, and I think are two Oscar winners. So there you go. You know, but yeah. Regardless, back to it. Yeah, but I totally agree with your estimation. She has a very naturalistic performance here. And what I love is how soon Sean Baker in the movie sets up her pathos as a character and as a human being. She's so easily swept away by this Russian kid that takes a liking to her at the beginning of the movie. And, you know, we kind of joke about how in the Disney movies, the woman just immediately falls for the man or whatever, and there's no development there. But it kind of shows at the beginning that the reason that she gravitates towards this guy is just because she's longing for a deeper connection with someone than what she feels on a daily basis. And she thinks that he sees her in a much deeper way than he actually does. And that's kind of the tragedy of the movie, is that like it starts off as like this fleeting pretty woman type romance. And I think we've talked about how the wedding sequence is probably the best scene in the movie. It's completely electric and just, I mean, magnificent. And that's such a fun stretch of this movie and it kind of captures that first moments that like you're in love and it's fleeting and it's fun and you're on top of the world. And when all that comes crushing down on you, it's a horrific thing. And I think her pathos and her character going through that, you know, people might argue that it seems like she's being passive within the second act, but she's slowly losing her autonomy of the situation. And the situation is somebody who literally had his heart in her hands and pretty much just grabbed it out of her and smushed it, you know? And that's a terrible feeling. And I think she conveys all of that so powerfully. And it's a really beautiful performance for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like it. I think like when we talk about performances, it's like, I mean, the obvious parts of them, it's like it's showy, and there's definitely obvious parts. That whole home invasion sequences, you know, her screaming, and there's a lot of physical violence and comedy and within that. And then of course there's the first part of the movie where it's very physical in the sexual sense too. But like in all that stuff is great. And obviously, you know, she's, you know, doing a thick Brooklyn accent throughout the whole movie as well. So like, you know, and you just contrast that with who she actually is in real life, and it's like she's just not the same person at all.
Yeah, not at all.
And that's very, very impressive on its face. But it's also like it's that, and it's also the actual emotional depth she gives Annie, and that is like what makes the performance really special.
Yeah, she had mentioned in whenever Tristan and I talked to her that like she was a fan of Sean Baker before getting the role, and like she was like fangirling that he had called her up and been like, "Hey, do you want to be in this movie?" Because she was like, "Oh, I love your work, yeah, absolutely." And she was like, and I immediately started like doing all the research and trying to figure out what the character was, because like I really, really, really wanted to impress him. And you can tell the love that both of them have for each other as just artists in the movie. And I think that's really sweet. I think it's really cool because you can just tell that like she really does care about what she does, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just, and it's so, I want to ask you a question. What was your thoughts? Because I know that I had set up that like, hey, look, there is kind of a jarring shift tone change halfway through this movie, and I kind of set you up for that before you saw it. What was like your thoughts watching that? Like, how do you think? Because like I did love like the home invasion scene is insane, and it's just a completely different energy. Like, what were your thoughts kind of about that sequence? And like, did you kind of figure, oh, this is definitely what Brett was talking about?
I mean, I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
is the thing. Like, it's kind of obvious when you actually read reviews and you kind of realize what the film is about. The thing about it is that, I mean, like you're going into this marriage sequence, which is as you said, a gorgeous sequence. I mean, it was so magical; it actually moved me to tears. I, there's just a lot of swooning kind of camera movements, and it actually feels very romantic. They're playing "The Greatest Day" by Take That overhead, which isn't the best song in the world, but it's used so well in the film. And and there's the montage of it. This is like their first week or so in marriage, the honeymoon phase, as it were. And it just goes from that straight into Toros is getting the call about his parents finding out about this. And that's kind of where it goes. That's kind of what it leads into, this very just violent tonal shift. To be honest, I think like when I wasn't necessarily thinking about this when I was watching the movie, but like now as I'm talking about it, it's not fully out of lockstep with the rest of the movie because it's a screwball comedy movie in a large part. It has the feel of something like Nights of Cabiria, or something like It Happened One Night. Where
that's a good call. Yeah.
It's like there's just so like they're romantic, and they're also just like it's kind of like witty, kind of snappy, kind of chaotic comedy in a sense. And it very much feels in that tone, like in the first half of the film, and also throughout the second half of the movie as well. So the more you think about it, the less jarring it actually is. So I mean, I wasn't really I guess because I saw it coming, I wasn't really affected by the ending, especially since there's other films that I saw, like Sea of the Sacred Fig, which I thought the tonal shift was more jarring there.
That's
and
completely
and I knew that was coming too, interestingly enough, but I was still like, oh, I don't know about this. But
to be fair, I think Anora does it much better than Sacred Fig, for sure.
Yeah. So I wasn't there with Sacred Fig, but with Anora, it was I think it was because it maintains that sense of humor, that sense of tone throughout, even if one is coded more romantically, the other is coded less so.
Yeah, and I understand your estimate. I would say my only real, I would say, critique of the film is within its tonal shift. It does, at least in my opinion, feels a little bit like it gets repetitive in theme as they're trying to find him in all these different places. That's the only part of the movie that I might trim just a little bit, because once they find him and they're on the plane again, that's whenever I'm engaged again. And they have that great line where she's like, yeah, I didn't make him sign a prenup or whatever. Everyone in the audience cheered at that sequence,
Yeah.
But then you're like, oh, well, they still got
What's
her.
interesting, I'm pretty sure that sequence of them trying to find Yvonne is only 20 minutes.
Yeah, which is fair, but it just feels like it goes on forever. You know what I mean?
It did. I didn't have that issue, to be honest. I guess I'm just used to long movies.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
But for me, I guess that aspect of it just maybe it's because I liked the rest of the movie so much, and that was just the part of it where I kind of glazed over just a little bit, if that makes sense. But I also thought the other supporting performances in this movie are great as well.
Oh
Honestly, the Russian kid, what's his name again?
Mark Adelstein.
Yeah, I really loved him. I remember watching the movie and being like, why isn't he being talked about for supporting? And then you figure out, oh, okay, because he's like not in half of this movie, but like he gives such a bold, comedic performance. I don't know if you've heard the story, but Sean talked about it after the movie that his audition tape was him just like looking outside a window naked in a hotel
Oh yeah,
room doing his
yeah. No,
monologue.
he was talking about that at the press conference at Cannes.
Yeah, he was just like, "Yeah, I'm sold," which I mean gives off the chaotic energy that this character exactly needed.
Yeah,
But
yeah. The sense of like kind of like aloofness and naivete as well, because like I mean, the movie basically shows he's basically like a fucking child, right? You know, like there's
yeah,
that line. I think it's Gardeck who says his room has spaceships on the wall and shit like that, right? Because
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
and that line got a kick out of my audience. Like my audience got a kick out of that.
Yeah,
Like
no,
they,
it's hilarious. And he completely this sold it. But like, and I think what the film also does is it kind of makes you go, oh, he just seems like a sweet, well caring guy before you figure out what's going on. And so
yeah,
like you kind of swoon for the relationship as well, and then you're like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
He kind of stabs you in the back. Like, I mean, we're gonna like spoil the movie anyway. But it's like, you know, when he's like, oh, we're just gonna, I guess we got to go do it now. It's just like, oh my god, that fucking prick.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And when she's in that office at the end and just like yells at him and stuff, it's satisfying because you
Well,
have that same frustration, you know?
yeah. And speaking of that scene, and I guess this is a segue into another performance. When Igor stands up and he says, "You should apologize to her." That was a moment where it's like, fucking like base, you know, Chad Igor, right?
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's ironic considering like what happened like, you know, hours before that.
Yeah, Igor's like one of my favorite aspects of the movie, the character, for sure. The actor was a really sweet, genuine guy. Whenever Tristan and I got to talk with him, he like was the one that talked with us the longest. And Tristan had already seen the movie. I hadn't yet. And Tristan talked about, yeah, I genuinely think that you might have my favorite performance of the movie outside of Mikey. And I remember being like, huh, that's interesting. And in seeing the movie, I totally got what Tristan meant by that because his tone is such in contrast with the rest of the film. Because the rest of the film is kind of it's nihilistic at times, and again, screwball comedy-esque, but it's like vulgar and intense and kind of dirty. And he has this kind of like sweet, radiant presence off of him. But he also kind of has some of that naivete that the kid does in the movie, which is an interesting contrast. And so you can kind of tell that like Annie kind of doesn't necessarily fall for him, but sees him as a comforting light for sure, which is just what makes the last 10 minutes of this movie one of the most devastating things of the year, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, his whole performance, like you introduce you know Borisov, and he's like, you know, he's kind of like this kind of stiff, tough guy driver. You know, you think like Ryan Gosling could drive, just like, you know, kind of Sigma type character in a sense. But you know, it kind of looks like you can learn like, oh, this guy's really he's kind of soft in a sense. And I think like it dawned on me because I was watching an interview with Mikey. You know, she was talking about how one of the times when she hit him, like during the home invasion sequence, like he put on a face that looked like his feelings were hurt. And then it kind of clicked for me. It's like, oh yeah, that's like kind of like that's like a really kind of subtle way of signaling like this guy's really not, you know, he's not the tough guy archetype, right? And you know, he's the one who kind of, you know, I mean, he stands up for her in the end, and he, I don't know, he sort of feels the need to protect, like he takes a genuine interest in her, and she doesn't want anything to do with it because like he was holding her, you against her will,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah, you have
house.
to still, like, even with that moments where he stood up for her and cared about her, he was still kind of involved in the whole thing and was a part of the process. So,
yeah, and it's like she really is not interested, but you know, eventually she just kind of like her guards kind of let down because of everything that just happened, and ultimately she decides I'm just gonna return to bed, you know, or whatever. And you know, she says the line that I can't say because it includes a homophobic slur, but you know, she kind of just retires her to bed and everything, and then that final scene comes, and you know, it really like is like she's just kind of let her guard down. Now she's just in that situation, and you know, again, he really helps drive home that feeling as well. And he's incredibly integral, and he's my favorite supporting performance in the movie as well.
Yeah,
he's really, really like it's a very understated performance, but it's a really excellent one.
it's a hard performance too. It's a really hard tonal performance to nail. Like, of course, the rest of the performances are going so big and they have so much energy, which is of course also a taxing thing to do as well. But to get that type of role, because what we figure out at the last scene is Igor's no better than anyone else. You know, he saw an opportunity and he took it as well. And that's maybe a nihilist, and you know, and that's also a thing is like, it's interesting that like Anora is coming out as like kind of an audience hit as well, because this movie in a way, I at least read it as incredibly nihilistic as well. It is this idea of like,
Yeah,
it is this viewpoint of like humanizing the sex worker, but it's also like, yeah, but everyone in her life used her. And at the end of the movie, when she thought maybe this guy wouldn't use her, he does as well, you know? And that's brings home, like, I think, because, like, the end of the movie, you know, there's no music, there's no anything, it just cuts. And it's a really somber moment when she's in the car and all of a sudden she realizes that, like, he's also sexually assaulting her when she doesn't want that to happen. And she's just in that situation. There's nothing she can do to help that. And
yeah,
again, it's all these situations where she's felt like she's safe and that she's heard end up being not the case. And so it's like, where is she heard and where is she seen at? And the movie never gives us an answer. And I find that really sad.
yeah. I mean, so I guess about that ending. See, you say it's a sexual assault. I might have misinterpreted it. I need to admit up front. I kind of thought he was trying to reciprocate that, which I guess that would technically be a form of it. But like, I didn't necessarily see it as he was trying to
Yeah. So
violate her.
it's interesting because you're actually having this discussion at my work. I work at the Alma Draft House. But yeah, we're actually having like an employee kind of discussion about the ending because people were kind of confused by it as well. And most people, my work coworkers, kind of just straight up interpreted it as a rape, which, I mean, that's such a hard distinction in line, and I don't really want to dive into that without the proper knowledge, you know. So I'm just going to leave that there as saying that somebody said that. For me, what I felt like is she had trusted this guy with herself, and then the moment they kind of start getting more physical, she starts to get scared because of all the times that she has been hurt,
Yeah,
and then she's just stuck in this situation, you know. And then, but there is a moment where she kind of does kind of want to pull away, and it continues to happen, and she's obviously kind of physically upset and crying, and he's still continuing to do it, and so it's not great on his part.
Yeah, I think I definitely can see that now. I just like when I was watching the film, I could have interpreted it as like, well, he's not really trying to do anything. He's just like bad to serve. He's just trying to reciprocate that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing about it, and that ending also really just caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting it. I really was not. Like it is so much different from any, and I've seen all of his movies. It's so different from anything he's ever ended a movie with,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Florida Project, with the kids running off in the into Disneyland. That's a much more uplifting ending. Red Rocket, is I guess it's not really either uplifting or bleak. It's just kind of like he's really going to go through with this now, and this is his life. Um, but this one is like it is so bleak in the sense that it's like she really is just not able to find true love and intimacy like she thought that she had with Yvonne. And I mean, there's two different ways of looking at it. There's the one that you said, which is like when he tried to reciprocate, or I guess there's three ways, and that's he tried to sexually assault her. There's the way you mentioned of like he tries to reciprocate genuinely, but she's afraid by it. Or there's also oh, God damn it, I had it and then I lost it. But I guess there's a few ways of really looking at it where I think what I was going to say is he tries to reciprocate, and she's so taken aback by it that she doesn't know how else to react to it.
Yeah.
And then she just, she just falls flat and she just starts sobbing, and that's, it's a big payoff there. I will say also, I think some people will come away from the movie with the interpretation of like, oh well, this is like Sean is trying to say this is what sex work does. It takes away intimacy. I don't think that's what the movie's trying to say.
No, not at all.
And obviously, I think you definitely can find intimacy while being a sex worker.
I mean,
but I think
so impassioned with trying to humanize sex workers that I don't think that's the intention that the film's trying to get across whatsoever.
Yeah, and also like I think this is about Annie's specific experience, and Mikey and Sean even said themselves, like, yeah, no, this is not going to be the experience of every sex worker, and we're not trying to blanket it as such.
Yeah, it's because I think what the viewer needs to understand about the movie is the fact that Annie had just fallen head over heels in love with someone within the matter of a few weeks that completely ruined her life and tried to trash her and tried to throw her away and only used her to get back at his parents. She has a sense of ultimate betrayal from that. Because sex work, it's in the title, it's work, it's transactional. There's not intimacy involved there. The thing that's hurting her is the thing that involved actual love and intimacy versus what he does as a career. And I think that's an interesting thing you brought up. It reminds me of when I saw the Q&A for I Saw the TV Glow at South by Southwest, and Jane did the Q&A afterwards, and they were saying about the movie. Someone had asked them about the trans experience of I Saw the TV Glow, and they were kind of like, Well, do you think it like kind of ends on a bummer note or whatever? Because like the identity isn't found, and Jane was like, "Well, I'm trying to craft a movie here. I'm not trying to explain my thesis statement about my identity." Probably phrased that way better than what I'm phrasing it now. But what stood out to me was like, I thought it was interesting that Jane was like, "Yeah, I'm a filmmaker. And I wanted to explain the this thing that so deeply resonates with me, but I'm also crafting a story with it. I'm not necessarily trying to make a documentary, And I kind of feel the same way with the Nora.
Yeah, like it's not going to be the universal sex worker experience. I know there are some sex workers, not all sex workers, but some sex workers who take issue with the portrayal of sex work. I'm not going to comment on it. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, that's just kind of outside of our pedigree,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are also plenty of sex workers who say this is a really thoughtful portrayal of it, and they really did their due diligence here. But again, I'm not going to say which one is right, which one's wrong. I don't know about it.
Yeah.
But I think the film wants to humanize Annie, obviously, as a sex worker, and they want to kind of show who she is kind of as a person outside of that. And it's going to lead to like, so I'm sure some other people have this interpretation. Of Jeff Snyder had this interpretation. She doesn't actually love Yvonne. He's just a gold digger. She's just like a gold digger. That's fucking bullshit.
Yeah, that's a dumb. Well. Yeah, that's dumb. So we all know Jeff Snyder just has every single great take. So
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't trust a movie take from a guy who decided to post a shirtless picture of himself on Twitter and say, "Who wants to date me?" Right?
Yeah, exactly. Especially this movie in particular. Oh, anyway.
Yeah. But yeah. The movie's really, like, at its core, it's about that deep burning desire for a connection like that. And it's not to say that it doesn't fully pertain to sex work, and obviously is exploring that, but it's not like, I still think it's demonizing sex work for stripping intimacy from anything. And it's also, or to that effect, I think it's just, this is kind of her life, and the movie shows she doesn't have that outside of sex work. And if the film showed that she had like a boyfriend outside of her job, then the point would be a little bit moot. But I think what it's really trying to say is that this is somebody who really wants that connection. She thought she had that connection. Turns out, the guy she married was just a simp. And I don't fully agree with the interpretation that he doesn't love her, but it's clear that he does not care as much about her as she does about him. And she gets beaten down by this whole situation, and so she's with Igor, and she's like, I guess I the only thing I know at this point is to just try to fuck him or whatever. And then she does that, he reciprocates in however way you want to interpret it, and that causes her to break down in the end.
And man, that's just because it's just tough, because it's just like, you want to see her be able to find love and contentment and happiness, but like, the movie's not going to end on a montage where we figure out that she's okay. It's kind of left to the viewer to figure out if you think she'll be okay. And again, that's I think it's nihilistic. I honestly do. I think it is kind of a calling card. But I also think it's a mission statement from Baker to show humanity and love to someone in this profession, and to be
Yeah,
like, look,
exactly.
these people hurt too, and these people, you know, like, because I think it's really easy for some people to, especially kind of in our day and age, in the like quote unquote like OnlyFans kind of era, of
Mhm.
wherever you discuss if that's sex work or not, yada yada. That again, disqualified to say that. But what I'm saying is some of those like influencer people, you know, people just kind of treat them like meat and go, okay, well, you know, you're doing this to yourself, yada 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 type of sensation, and they don't see them as actual human beings with a story. And so
Right.
what Sean Baker's trying to do is really humanize people that are challenging to humanize for modern audiences. And so the fact that this movie's actually being really embraced by not only critics but like mainstream culture is really important because it's going to make us see each other more than just people of the profession that we don't have the perspective of, you know.
100%. And I think you know, the best thing about that is like, you know, I mean I don't want to bring, you know, so much of this into this, but we're a few weeks off of Trump winning 4 more years in the White House, and I mean it's a bleak time.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it really is, and it's going to be very bleak, especially for people like Annie who, you know, aren't just sex workers; they're working class and they're
Yeah.
poor.
And let's just be
And,
real, they're women. I mean, Donald
yeah,
Trump is a
and they're
threat to
women, and
women, you know.
also
Yeah,
immigrants, and
absolutely.
you know, I mean, people will talk about Sean Baker's politics. Some people think he's right wing. I don't. I
I
don't
don't
really agree with that.
so. No.
Um, you know, there's a whole thing to talk about there. I do think some of his beliefs are questionable, but I don't. I'm not going to call him a MAGA person. I don't believe that. Um, but I, you know, I think, you know, empathy for these types of people, you know, especially now, is really important. You know, and you know, you're gonna, and you know, fucking, you know, incoming vice president said, like, was talking about childless cat ladies, and you know, uh, women who get physically abused need to suck it up. You know, it's like, well, shit. People like, you know, these people need like some empathy right now because, you know, they're certainly not going to get it from, you know, the president or, you know, a lot of the people, you know, in the government, and certainly not their supporters. And so it's like, well, you gotta, like, somebody needs to be there to say, hey, these people were not so different from you. They're the same. They're just like you, and you should embrace them as your other.
Yeah, they have the same aches and pains as you, absolutely. And it's kind of weird because it's like it even feels weird to say like, oh, they aren't like us, like labeling them as they, you know, like we're all people, we're all individuals with our own work and what we want to do with our lives, and we have our own aches and pains, and if we can just all come together and recognize that, you know, it's not. I don't even think everyone necessarily that voted for Trump is like an evil person. It's just like we just need to understand, essentially, at the end of the day, that like let's just have empathy for one another because we aren't being shown that on a global scale because the leaders of our country aren't portraying empathy in a large light, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh. Is there anything else, any other things you'd like to say about Anora?
Well, I think, you know, on the subject of supporting performances, I think, you know, I'd be a little remiss if we didn't talk about Karan Karagulian,
Yeah.
who plays Toros. What's really cool about this guy in particular, he's been in every single one of Sean Baker's movies.
Yeah, we asked him about that in the interview.
Yeah,
Tristan brought that up, and he was like, "Yeah, Sean Baker." He told us that Sean Baker makes a set feel like a home, so he'll always work with Sean Baker, which I thought was a
yeah.
nice, it's nice sentiment. Yeah,
But like, it's kind of crazy, like how I mean, I think he's only a voice performance in Red Rocket. or at least that was what someone said to me when I said I don't remember who he was in Red Rocket, and I tried to look for him when I rewatched it, and I didn't find him. Apparently he's like just a voice performance, but he has a pretty big role in Tangerine. He's got a decent sized role in Starlight. He's a big character in Prince of Broadway. He's not in the Florida Project that much. Like he's only in like a couple scenes. But like this is like his biggest role here, and he this is the one that gives him the most to do, and he gets to be funny, he gets to be loud and terrifying, and he walks that type of role. And I think he's the second best supporting performance in the movie behind Borzov. I think he's even better than Edelstein. I think he's really great. I really love the editing in this movie as well. And it's cool. It's cool because Sean Baker edited his own film. But what's really cool about how this film is edited, I mean, timing the real-time sequence is obviously a very impressive editing feat, but also like it's edited a lot like a Robert Altman movie.
Totally.
That's how a lot of the movie feels. Like like you'll watch Nashville, you'll see a lot of like cuts to like zooms and stuff. Like people will be zooming in, and there's a lot of zooms in this movie as well. And it has the feel. It does have the feel of something like Nashville. Including in how it's acted as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean Baker definitely has an Altman type of beat to him. A very naturalistic, very much like you're a fly on the wall hearing people talk type of mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good call.
Some of the songs that are used in the movie, like if there was a Oscar category for music supervision, like this would probably have to take the cake. I mean, it's like I think there's like 60 licensed songs in the entire film, which is crazy.
Yeah. Was Dreaming Blondie only in the trailer? Did it ever play in the movie?
I listened for it. I don't remember hearing it.
Interesting.
But I mean, there's Greatest Day that we mentioned before. There's All the Things She Said. There's where the Hood At by DMX.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, just like so many like vines that song was in. Just hearing that was like, oh my god. Daddy as Fuck. Which I think like a lot of the soundtrack was curated by the actual, like the actresses who played the sex workers, or some of the actual sex workers who were in the film, rather. So not just Mikey, but other people as well, just picking songs that they liked. That was really, I thought that was a nice touch. The cinematography of this movie is impressive, I think. I mean, there's also the zooms, but there's also like how they shoot the actual like scenes in the club.
Yeah,
like I like the aesthetic of it, and this is, and you can kind of tell like this is Drew Daniels, who he shot Red Rocket, but he most notably so far has shot Euphoria. Like most episodes of Euphoria, he's the DP. And you can sort of tell, I think, but this movie, but it's very aesthetically pleasing, and that's like one of the only good things about that show is the cinematography. So,
I can see how they got the same kind of aesthetic though. That checks out.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. There's some really great moments in here. There's the moment where Annie and Yvonne are in the house for the first time, and they're about to have sex in the bed, and just the way Yvonne flops back onto the bed, like doing like a fucking like Sonic the Hedgehog role or some shit like that.
Like that got a huge laugh out of the TIFF audience. It's really good.
Yeah, the Belcourt audience. That was like the first big laugh from the audience, I think.
Yeah.
Just come back to Mikey Madison. She's hot.
I mean, fair.
I mean, you know, there's the obvious stuff in the film that would make me think that, but even outside of that, like there's just there are parts of this movie where I was like, God damn it, she is so pretty.
Yeah. She's the sweetest too. I mean, she was so genuine.
She seems really sweet, yeah.
Yeah, I wish her the best in her career, honestly. I feel like after this, like she's gonna blow up and be a big star. So
yeah, I mean,
it's a star making.
Winning an Oscar will help for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, but even like if she doesn't win the Oscar, like she'll be in a lot of things, you know.
Yeah,
like this is very much like a Paul Mescal and Normal People type of like star performance, you know.
Yeah, I'll also say, like, outside of Anora, if people really want to see Mikey Madison do a performance that's closer to who she actually is, she was a recurring character on this show, Better Things, which was on FX. I'm saying this like even though I haven't finished the show, because the last episode of it I watched was not very good, so it kind of put me off watching it for a while. But what I've seen at the show, you know, she's playing kind of like an angsty teenager, but it's much closer to who she actually is, just the kind of sweet person. And she was really young in that show too. She was like 17 when they started shooting it.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, and she's really great. Even then, and if it interests you more, the show's creator and its lead actress, Pamela Adlon, is the voice of Bobby on King of the Hill.
Interesting.
And once I learned that, like every time I heard her voice in the show, I just heard Bobby. I just heard Bobby Hill.
Now, Bobby, I'll tell you what.
God damn it, Bobby. Right.
That's so good, though. It sounds interesting. Is that... Shoot, I've heard about this. Is that also the one that has Louis C.K. involvement in it?
Yeah, he was involved for like 2 seasons and then he got canceled. But
okay.
I don't think he was involved after that.
Interesting. I mean, I didn't mean to bring that up as like a don't
watch. No. I understand. I'm just like, you know, like he wrote a few episodes of the early seasons.
I got you. Do you remember? Not to go on a complete side tangent, but do you remember what was that movie, like I Love Him, Daddy, or whatever?
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. I never saw it.
I never saw it, but that's crazy that even came out. Like,
yeah.
That was some weird, like, Woody Allen type beat going on there.
Yeah,
like, it's crazy. Anyways, final thoughts on Anora, George.
Favorite movie of the year. I don't see that changing unless, I don't know, maybe All Imagine Is Light is just that amazing. Which, I mean, I think it is going to be amazing, but I don't think it's going to be as amazing.
I'm telling you, The Brutalist. I'm telling you right now, The Brutalist is going to rock your world.
Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
I've spilled all my thoughts about it. I have a Letterboxd log where I gush about it. I have a Substack post where I gush about it. Just go read those if you really want more of my thoughts on the movie. But I don't think I added anything here that didn't add there.
Yeah, and if you do want to read George's Substack article, it is on our website, workshoppinghumanity.com. So there you go. Go look it up. Go read it. My final thoughts on Anora? Yeah, I've really come around on this movie. When I first walked out of it, I was kind of off put by a little bit of its nihilism and its third act shift change, but I didn't hate it. But the more and more, like, this movie stayed with me for a while, and it really, like, I thought about its themes, I thought about its performances, I thought again about its overarching reach of empathy, in such a otherwise vulgar and nihilistic movie that there was a lot of warmth to it as well, and how incredibly difficult that would be to attain as a director. And so, yeah, I think this is a total win for Sean Baker. I think he's one of our greatest filmmaker and writers working right now. And Anora, I mean, I'm so glad he's getting the attention for it. I think it isn't my favorite movie of the year, but it's definitely among the best movies of the year for sure. This is a great film, and once again, it's totally worth seeing, especially if you are a film fan. So, Anora, that was our episode of Workshopping Humanity, guys. We're actually kind of in a soft reboot again, but make sure to check out our website, workshoppinghumanity.com. We have a whole new layout. It looks fresh. It looks nice. It looks clean. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at workshopping.humanity for reviews, editorials, podcasts, all that fun stuff. You should also check out, George and I are doing a project called A1 and A2 Productions. That's coming out of the ashes, really. I have a lot of plans for that within the next year, so you guys should totally follow us there as well, as I'm sure George wants you to do as well, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. We're I don't know that we're gonna be the next A24 anytime soon, but if y'all got a project that you want us to potentially attach ourselves to, help out with whatever you need to do, hit us up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your Huckleberry.
That's kind of the thing. Like, we just want to be able to expose really good art and talented people on our platform, and kind of create a bond of people who want to tell good stories. And that's the thing. You joke about A24, but they started with Inside the Mind of Charles Swan III or whatever, and now they're producing Everything Everywhere All at Once. So it takes a brick to build a house. So we're laying our bricks. Absolutely.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah, exactly. The brutalist architecture, it took a 3.5 hour movie to get that thing made. So there you go. Yeah, you should totally follow that as well. And George, do you have anything to shout out?
My Substack, George on the Beat.
Yeah.
My Letterboxd page, George A. Ehret. I don't post much on Instagram, but you want to go there, George Alex Ehret. Not on Twitter.
We don't like Twitter.
Yeah, even before Elon, I was just like, this is too much.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. That's where you can find me.
Sweet. I genuinely, I've told you this, and this isn't just because we're friends. I'm saying this. I absolutely love your Substack. I think it's really engaging, and I read every post.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so, next episode, when it comes out, should be coming out. I don't know what it's gonna be about yet, but I have ideas. I will circulate some just to generate hype. Joker 2 is on the table right now, which would be a very interesting episode. And that is kind of, and also, so the two that are kind of in the head right now of people I've been talking to is Joker 2 and the Terrifier franchise. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. But I have a really interesting thesis statement for both episodes. So, stay around. Oh, awesome. I do actually want to plug real quick my other podcast that I'm doing with my friend Kevin. Outside of movies, I've been a really big theme park enthusiast, and me and Kevin met while working at Mission Space, and we'd always joke about pitching different theme park attractions, and they would get ridiculous. Like, we had an idea about making like a Breaking Bad themed ride in the house, and then the food you would get at the world is roof pizza, and they would like throw pizza off of a roof, we had like crazy ideas like that. But we decided to make it a podcast. Yeah. And so, yeah, we did episode 1 on Sonic the Hedgehog. Our next episode's on Bluey. It's the thing about that podcast is there's some crazy, crazy plans for that podcast that I do not want to spoil. So I would definitely follow Disattractions, just because at first you might think it seems like just your normal everyday bros talking about theme parks, but it's going to get wild, and I'm really excited to see where that forms as well. So yeah, there's some projects going on, and thanks guys so much for listening. Thank you, George, for being on.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll see you guys next time.
Peace.
Sweet.